I decided to make a design change to this building that would affect exactly how the sidewalls were and how the roof was actually being held up. I realized that having the only windows be just on the very front of the building was going to make it kind of dark inside and it would be a lot less interesting. So I decided to to wrap the windows around. This is just something that I kind of just felt like, well, it probably should have always been like that. And the reason why I didn't do it that way originally was because if you look at it now, you can see the big challenge of this design is holding up this massive roof slab. The roof looks a whole lot heavier because of this blue drop ceiling here, which is going to be just a housing for the light on the front. But it's still a very large roof slab with a huge overhang. And having wraparound glass in the front means that you can't really hold all this up with just the walls on the side because glass frames don't hold anything up. So that means that I'm going to have to put in some columns. And at first, I put them on the outside, and that was really terrible. And so now I'm going to be locating columns on the inside, right inside the frame. There's going to be some thick columns in there right here and right here that are going to be holding up this roof. And there will also be columns that are further to the inside that'll be right at the portion where it's at its lowest point. I also decided I wanted to have a glass door because why not? And it should technically look all the way through. I should have probably had the glass continue around. And I didn't do that because I thought that that was going to be too much glass. It would be just too much in the opposite direction of just having it be, half the building just be glass. So I decided to just have it stop there. Welcome back. Today I have a selection of paints here, and we're going to take a look at which colors I should use to paint the model. It's time to start painting. Yes, here's all the paint selections, and I just have to figure out which colors I'm going to use and make that decision because, of course, color is so important. And paint all of these different pieces, get them all coated, get them all painted really nicely, and then they have to dry, preferably overnight. And I need to measure out on the base exactly where the curb here is going to go. And the hardest part of all, of course, is going to be gluing the structure together because it's going to be so top heavy. I still haven't figured that out yet. So one thing that I like to use is this right here, which is like a kind of a container, like a plastic container that you might get at takeout or something that they give you. And I don't remember where I got this. I've got a bunch of these sitting in the cupboard, and I've washed it out. So what I do with it is, I'll put my paints, like I'll put dabs of paint in, actually on the, okay. Okay. And what I like to use with the paints is one of these. This is just a plastic top to this kind of little storage container that usually these things, I get these from recycling, or I get these from like restaurants or takeouts and stuff like that. And instead of recycling them, I keep them. I've got like a bunch of them in my cupboards. I fill that up with water and wash the paintbrushes off in that. And then the top, I actually use this. Usually I turn it this way and just like put the different paints, like bits of the paint right here in this, and use this as a kind of painting dish that I can then dip the brush in and paint. And that's how I do it. And look, I found the black, which I don't know if I'm going to use either. The black would be for like going around the edges of the base because I'm going to be putting down all of that black sandpaper so that it will look like a road. Warm gray. It's not the best color in the world, but I don't feel like mixing paints today, so I'm just gonna do it the easy way. And every gas station I've ever been to, that's pretty much the color the ground looks like anyway. Basically that color. Here we go. For some reason, I have like this song going through my head. So, and of course, because YouTube, I can't share what it is. I mean, I can tell you, but all right. Well, I can already see what I'm doing wrong here. Is I'm painting myself into a corner so that I'm going to have to get paint on my hands one way or another. This is just one coat. I think I'm only just going to do one coat on this. Well, I can do two coats. You can do two coats with this paint while it's wet, but you'll see in just a couple minutes this will start to warp. Well, I'll be surprised if it doesn't. Oh, there's a little something. Get off there. Ugh. What is that? Some crumb. So there we go. And then I'm also trying to keep an eye on the edge of the curb here so that it doesn't bunch up. Okay, so far so good. And it's not warping. I was so prepared for that to happen. That's okay, because you know what? If I had glued this down before I painted it and then it started to warp, then I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. It would just be warped and it would look terrible. While the curb pieces are in the kitchen drying, we'll now start working on the shelter, the gas station, the gas pump shelter. Okay, I did the unthinkable and mixed some paint, which I can just hear my ARC professor saying, "Oh, it's the Easter Bunny." You were very much discouraged from painting your models in school, so this is a little bit of misbehavior here, and but you know, I'm still not sure if the blue is maybe a little too dark, but it's getting to the point where it's too late, so I don't know. I should probably put a little more white in there. But that's what I'm going for anyway. This is the underside. It's pretty much the color I wanted. I'm still a little nervous about how it's actually going to look in practice, but it didn't paint very well because the brush I had wasn't big enough, so you have to be careful and try to get a really smooth stroke on here, or otherwise you're going to get all this kind of gloopy ribbing, the way it's got those kind of striations in it, and it kind of gooped up a bit, is because the brush is too small, and I had to go over and over again too much, and then the paint starts to half dry, and then you get that kind of bunching up. But the curd pieces, those turned out really well and really smooth because I painted them quickly and the brush was the right size for this size of piece of wood. And of course, after doing that, I've changed my mind on this color and think that it's a little too dark brown. So now I want to try and maybe mix a lighter version. Maybe I won't do that now because it turned out so good. I don't know, we'll see. Okay, here's what we have so far with painted portions of the roof that's going to go over the gas pumps. There's a slight differentiation in the color from the top and the bottom because I mixed paint, which I do not recommend doing, because if you change your mind and decide you want to use more or something like that another day, you'll never get it exactly the same. It will always have some variation in it. And then if you try to touch up like a couple days later and you think it's the same color, it won't. It will look different. It'll be different, not match. So that was a big mistake. The craftsmanship of the paint looks really terrible. So I might recut these pieces and do this over again and throw these away because I'm not happy with them. here's the column pieces over here, and these are painted white. It's a little hard to tell because of the lighting in here, but I painted one coat so far on this and then both sides, but I don't paint the part where the glue is going to go. So I leave that piece, that bit there, unpainted, and then the rest of it then is painted this white. So here's the kind of the dish that I use. It was not really a dish, it's just the top to one of these containers where I mixed the paint, and I use that to as a kind of a paint dish. And I changed my mind on the original white I was going to use. This cream color did not work with blue. There's just no way. It doesn't look right, and it was too close to the wood color. So I felt like, nah. I changed my mind and decided to use just acrylic white, just plain old white on these. And I think white and blue together will actually look kind of nice. So that's the idea there. Okay, so I have my painted columns here. This is the support column, and it has the inverted triangular groove cut into it that you should be able to see there. And that angle matches the angle of this part of the column here, this wing part of the support column. So that's going to go like that. Okay? The next step is to start gluing the pieces together, the fun part. So our glue options are right here. I'm a bit picky about how strong things are. Like, I like to use the strongest bonding agent that I possibly can. So that's why I have this wood glue here that I have used, and I've had this for several years. I just spent 10 minutes taking this cap off and soaking it in water to try to get it so that the glue would be able to come out of there. And then we have Elmer's glue, which for a 143 scale model or even smaller, I would say, you know, don't laugh at Elmer's glue. This stuff, yes, you may have been using it since kindergarten, but it is actually the modeler's friend. This is the best, probably the best and most universally used modeling glue that it's the most versatile. It's very good stuff. This will work. It's not, though, it's nowhere near as strong as the wood glue is going to be. But the problem with the wood glue is that it is so sticky, and it also dries yellow, that it will present a very interesting challenge if you get into a situation where you can't do touch-up paint, okay? So that's why I'm going to use this for the columns, but I'm not going to use it in other areas, and I'll explain why, because you'll see that if there's something I won't be able to paint over to do touch-up paint to, I would not want to use this because it's going to dry yellow and look terrible. The Elmer's glue will dry almost clear, and I guess what I mean is if there's a little bit of residue or a little bit of excess that shows somewhere, or just a tiny bit that you could see in a corner, this dries to where it wouldn't look so terrible, you wouldn't really notice it. And that's why, again, it's just another one of the many reasons why Elmer's glue is such a good thing to use, though it is not as strong. So we have a support column here. So, and it's going to be holding up two very heavy slabs. I want to use the strongest bonding agent I possibly can, so I'm going to try and use the wood glue here. So here's the piece I'm going to glue on, and there's two ways to do it. I can either put the glue here and just stick the piece on, or I can put the glue here. Which one do you think? Yeah, I'm going to put it on this, then I'm going to stick it to that. Okay, it's been a long time since I've used this glue, so hopefully it comes out properly. Reasonable amount, it's right on the edge. Perfect. So I'm going to turn this over and very carefully set this in the very center of the support column. Is it center? It might be a little hard to tell on the camera, but I'm leaning over this, looking at it. I've got a bit of a shadow, so I'm going to turn it this way so the light Okay, there's my lines drawn on here. The center line is right there. It might be a little hard to see in this light. There's two lines. The outer line is the one I'm going to use, that I'm going to just adhere. I only need two corners to glue the thing down. So let's get started on that bit. So here's the piece that I'm going to glue. This one first, and this is the reverse side that'll be glued down. So this is never going to see the light of day ever again. Let's get some glue on here. Oh, it's not going to come out. So I'll turn this over, and I'm going to lean over it to see where I'm going on here. But I'm going to put it right up to that corner. There's definitely a good amount of glue under there. I can feel it kind of floating, wanting to float on top of here. But I use just the right amount because none of it's coming out along the edges. I've got this one glued down. I'm going to put something on here heavy because the board wants to warp up a little bit, and I don't want it to do that underneath this piece, which is a little stiffer. So I'm going to put something to compress this down. I'm going to do one at a time. I could put two. I could rush, try to rush it and put two here together, and then they might slide around, and then I could end up with an ugly mess and have to, scrape it off and do it over. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to be a little more careful, and I'm going to just do this one at a time. Okay, I've made a quick trip to the hardware store and picked up some roads. This right here, this is what I've been using to make the road surface in all of my models. This drywall sandpaper is what this is. And this here is the leftover paper, the leftover sandpaper that I have from the last model that I did. And if there's a piece in here that I've cut, yes, there is. So you can see that it's designed, it has this notching on here so that it can be put onto a sander. That's the whole purpose of this, obviously, but I can't make use of that. So what I do is to get the most use out of each piece, each sheet, I'll just start like at this corner and then just cut using the pen knife, make cuts on these. And I usually do it turned over because the paper is what you really need to cut, and I don't like to scratch off too much of this stuff, the grit. Because, if you do, you might be able to see the corners of this get a little frayed, and you don't want to have too much of that. So to keep the black grit on there, I just turn it over and I cut on this side. And this is one of the cuts I've made for the previous model. I must have sliced a piece off there. So this is kind of the way that I use this. I looked and I didn't quite have enough to fit on the model that I have because it's so huge that I'm going to need a lot of road surface. So I went and bought some more, and this costs maybe like $5.97 or something. I mean, and grabbed another bottle of wood glue just because I'm sick of messing around with the nozzle on the old bottle. And again, that's like $2. So, $7 or $8 worth of stuff right here. And this will go through probably a couple of models. So this is the stuff I'm going to use. We're going to glue it down with the wood glue by making some cuts. And the only thing about this stuff that I hate is just how bad it smells. So it's gonna it really stinks. It smells like bad pasty breath. And it's the glue that's on it that stinks. But it doesn't smell once it's on the model, thankfully. So there's that. Okay, so here's the base. And what I'm doing with the new package of sandpaper is I'm taking out the pieces that are like this. And what I've decided to do is use full-length pieces as much as I can, and then for the pieces that need to be shorter than full length, because I've measured and you can't go exactly 3 across, those will be in the middle. That way it'll be a little bit symmetrical. Unfortunately, this wider portion is a little too wide for one whole piece, so I'll have to have a few strips going across here to make up the difference. And then on this side, it's a little shorter than. Here's what those look like after they've been trimmed, to have those cut off, to have that cut off. And I'm just putting those aside. What we have so far, I have the pieces, some cut pieces of black sandpaper glued down, and what I've been using to get these to be nice and flat on here like this. You can see that there's no wrinkles anywhere in this. It's nice and smooth, because what I'm using to compress these is this old cutting board. So I take the cutting board after I've put the glue and everything on here, and then I place that on top of there with some books. You have to do each of these one at a time, and that way after it sits for a few hours, it can dry and be nice and flat. The back of that cutting board on the opposite end of it here is really smooth and flat. So I recommend going out to the store and investing in a cutting board that's, very flat, straight and flat it should be, to do something like this with. The reason why there's a hole on this one right here, I've actually thought ahead, and I've made this little piece. I actually sanded it down. It was a square piece, and I sanded it down, which is going to be, I'm going to chop the end of it off there and glue it here in this spot. And that's going to be used as like a little notch for a stand for one of my figures. So I can have a figure pose by standing on this and have this be the base. Instead of having the figure stand on here with like a plastic base, why not use the base of this model itself as the base for the figure? So I'll put that little black thing there, and it won't look out of place. I don't think, even if there's no figure there, I think, having a little thing sticking up that's black, that's the same color as the pavement, isn't going to be a problem. So that's why I thought I could do that. And if I have more than one figure, I'll just have one lean on the other, maybe, something like that. You can see I've had to do some special cuts here to get that side to fit. And there's the glued down concrete kind of berm on here. Okay, I think this is the best one I've done. And I have tried this 4 times with this side. I've got some glue there that dried, because the last one I did, I pulled it off because I made it like honestly a 1/16 of an inch too wide, and it overlaps. And I probably should have just kept it, because the overlap is at least smooth. But nope, I panicked and pulled it off. So now I'm trying to do this one. Let's see how well it fits. And it's very smooth right here, and then it starts to overlap. And on this side, I can feel it overlapped right here, just a tiny bit. So slight. So I think I'm just going to have to make do with this, and there's going to be a bit of a bump in the parking lot. Okay, the last piece. I had to trim and trim and trim this to get it to fit. And I'm going to glue that down, and then the road surface will be done finally. That didn't take forever. Cutting, I will say that cutting angles is by far going to be the most difficult thing that you do. It's very picky, and you're going diagonally to the grain, which is, the wood is not going to cooperate. So you have to be, that's why I'm using this, that's why I use these rulers to try to keep the knife going along the ruler. Yes, I'm holding a tissue in my hand because I really have to hold this on here. It's just a tiny little poke, so it wasn't a big deal. I just sort of moved the wrong way and poked directly into my finger. And where things start to go wrong is when you don't pay attention. I do not recommend working on these while listening to too much exciting music or having videos on or anything that's going to make you look away. If something does happen to you, then I strongly recommend washing the thing and maybe stopping what you're doing for a little while. And if you have to pick up bits of finger, then do that and do what you have to do. But you will definitely, it will scare you enough that you will definitely change whatever method you were using that caused it to happen pretty quickly, because you're not going to want it to happen a lot. But anybody who builds these, I promise you, they're going to be able to point to a few little scars, probably on their fingers, hopefully not on their hand. Okay, so having finished cutting that piece, here it is. So this angle right here, this is the cut I just did. Let me see if I can get the camera to focus on that. I have to be a certain distance away and then it will focus. But this is a factory cut here. This is just how the wood came. This is the original edge, and this is the butt end of it, which is also a factory cut. And the angled portion, when you try to cut a V shape in modeling wood, that's when you're going to have the most trouble. It's actually way easier to do a V shape in thinner wood. If you're using thinner wood, you're going to do V's fine. And super thick wood like this, it's pretty difficult. And angles like this across the grain on basswood, even for thinner basswood, is difficult. So the design change that we have here is, this is what I originally had. What I originally was doing was this was the front of the building, right? And the windows were going to be, over here. And this was the back of the building, and it was straight up and down. It was not at an angle. And then I decided to change my mind because I wanted the windows to wrap around, which meant in order to wrap it around, since it was going to go all the way up to the roof, the low level of the roof, I basically would have just had to chop that whole front off. And then I had what I thought was an epiphany. Oh, why don't I just, and I'll use this as the front, the straight up and down part, and have this be the back, so that I have V on, the whole thing shaped like a V, so that it better matches the columns. And the angle of this is the same angle as this column. So that's what I thought I was going to do until I realized part of the way through trying to cut the door that the angle of this thing for the part that I had intended to be the front is it's a steeper angle, a steeper pitch than the back end of it was. That's how I actually had designed it. And I kind of had forgotten about that when I tried to flip it around. And then I realized I'm going to have to start over again. So that's no good. So if you look at this, here's the front end. You can tell, if I have to hold it back a little further. There we go. You can probably tell looking at this pretty easily that the pitch of this right here is definitely steeper than the pitch of this portion right here. So that is how it looks in the design. So this is actually going to be the front. And I love how it's it's very counterintuitive when you look at this. You see this right angle. That's because the windows are going to be forward of this, and they're going to be, front of them will be at an angle. But there will be a door on one side of it, and it'll just be a wall on the other side. Okay, today I'm cutting a door into the back wall of the building right here. Here's my door. So this is the back wall piece, which you can see is a balsa wood piece because of the dark grain there. And I also have cut the doors and the side walls, which is right here. Here's the side wall. So this is the side that's going to have the door cut in. So this is the design change that I was talking about. So I drew the pencil markings to site the building on this base piece right here. So there's my pencil lines all around, and you can see exactly why I had to cut the sides off this base, because this building is absolutely huge. This piece is almost exactly 1 foot in width from here to here, and the building takes up like almost the whole width of that. And this right here is actually the front. So there's a little bit of space, but then that the glass frame is going to angle outward anyway. So then with the roof overhang, it's actually going to be bigger than the base. So the other two pieces that I cut off the sides are right here. And those pieces are, I'll actually turn it around here. So of course I did this backwards. Okay, so with the front being up there, these two pieces are going to be here and here, like that. That's, I mean, there's going to be a way that I'm going to glue them on. What I did is I took some scrap basswood that I still had laying around and decided to cut some sidewalk pieces, which will be for the concrete. And that's how this is going to be, these are going to be glued together. And it's going to go like right here at the front. You see how the building will butt up against this, or this will butt up against the building. And that's those two pieces, and that'll glue on top of these and hold them there. So there will be a little bit of road piece here and here, a little pavement. And then I think I'm going to make the sides of these a concrete paint. So this will just drop down, but it'll be like concrete on the sides. That's how I'm kind of imagining this restaurant being. So then I have to think about what to do with the interior, because look how much interior I have. I have a few ideas, but boy, I really don't know what to do. It's so huge that I'm not going to just leave it empty. I'm going to paint the floor and everything. I don't know what color yet, but I've got to do something with it. It's just so huge, and there's all this space. I don't want to waste it. I don't think any of the figures will fit inside of it necessarily, unless they're real small figures. But I'm going to try my best to design a restaurant for them, and that's what I'm thinking about now. But I just don't want it to take forever, because it's already taking way too long. Okay, got the first coat here on the concrete pieces that are painted this brown. I painted the brown color and did around the edges as well. This right here. And it's turned out fairly smooth. And first coat, and I decided to do the outside first. I put a little marking on here for this, for being the inside wall. So there's that one, and this one has its first coat, and this little bit right here isn't painted. That's going to be silver, and here's what that looks like. So I'm going to do a second coat on these. And the base I started working on yesterday, and there's the lines on here where I marked off where the building's supposed to be. So I actually found this blue tape that I was using to paint my place like years ago, and decided to try to use this. I'm not worried about it leaving behind some residue, because I will just sand it off if there is. So I've decided to try to use this to put a nice little border. Okay, this is all dry. I let this dry yesterday on the counter. And so now we can pull the tape off and see how it looks. Hopefully it didn't bleed through too much. All right, there it is. And it didn't leave any tape residue, although it did actually shred some of the grain on the wood, which is kind of weird, but that's fine. That's not going to hurt anything. Here's our sidewalk, and then there's still, it's probably impossible to see in the camera shot, but there's still a little pencil residue on the edge, so that shows me that's exactly where those lines were supposed to be, so that the walls are going to go right there, and then I will paint. The next part that we're going to do is going to be getting the concrete curbs ready for the front of the building. So they'll be glued together like this. Okay, there's a lip on this. It's going to overlap, and then there will be more glue put there, and then that'll be slotted onto that like that, so it'll actually kind of clasp together. That's the idea. Okay, now that I have this important extension piece, it's time to put the blacktop tar onto this part of it, this being the concrete part. And there are two of them. Here's the other one right here. And they're mirrors of each other, and I didn't screw up too badly with it this time, except there was I think with this one, yeah, there was a problem with the glue dribbled on the back and I had to chisel away that was awful. But here it is. So, and here is the black sandpaper, the 80 grit. That's what it is, I think 80 grit. And so now I have to measure this, and you can see, of course, because I like to make it difficult, there's a curve. So once again, I have to not just cut a rectangle, it has to have an inverted curve on it, and I have to measure it in reverse because it has to be drawn on the other side. To cut those pieces of paper, then that will be then glued onto this. They're all done, and it turned out pretty well. There isn't anything here that I think I could have done any better. So this is glued down. I used the wood glue, so it's super strong, and there's no wrinkles or anything in here. And so there's both of them. And so now what I'm going to do is to try to get rid of the white parts, the part where there's either no grit or maybe there's some wood showing or something. I'm just going to very gently touch this up with a little bit of black paint, like just a tiny bit. And that way it'll just look a little bit more professional. What you see on the table now is the roof. And what I did with this, I mean, I've cut the lengths of these. And these are about roughly 14 inches each one, and they're exact. Like, I did a really good job cutting these. I didn't film that part. There wasn't much to film. The roof of this building, I mean, the architecture, apart from the front, the glass facade, the architecture is all about the roof. That's really what this building is about. So this roof I decided to select the very best pieces of wood that I had in the package. Like, I took the best 2 sheets of this stuff and cut it, and the 2 that have the very best cuts are going in a certain spot, and the other 2 that have slightly lesser good cuts are going, like, that's how picky I was with this stuff. I want this is the part of it that's going to face the viewer. This is what's going to be seen by everybody in the world. So this has to be the very best. So it's got the very best corner, all factory cuts, no discoloration. It's very smooth. And so now it's going to be painted. And it will be trimmed. I'm not going to trim it, though, because the piece, the roof, the front part of the roof isn't exactly that long. It's, I think, a little tiny bit shorter than that. I think maybe like less than an inch will come off here. So it'll be like that much from there to there. I have to figure out how to glue the 2 pieces together. And then I've gotten really adventurous here. And I have bought some lights. I have literally bought some LED lights that I'm going to be using on this model. And they were bought from a company called Osmium, who I've never actually heard of. But I just looked up I just did some research online for mini LED lights, and I wanted some lights that were going to be like a strip type light, and I bought I have a few different types, and they're going to be arranged like I'm going to leave them in the package because they're labeled. So they're actually on the inside, they're going to be like this. And so I have to come up with a way to hold this together and then create some kind of mounting for these lights on the underside. Right now, what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the remainder of the video is using the white paint. Now the white, I've decided with the roof to actually make it blue. I think that'll just be more interesting to look at, more exciting, more of a statement than trying to just make it white. I just think white is just kind of boring. But the underside of it, inside the restaurant, will want to be white. So I'm choosing which side of this to do, and it's going to be this is the underside under here. And I'm going to be painting all of this white today, and then at some point I'll use what's left of this cerulean blue paint, and we'll mix some white in to get that blue color to do the top side of the roof, which is going to take a lot of patience, because mixing paints, you only get one shot and you can never get the colors right again. So I'm going to not do that until like last. So, okay, using the big brush for this one, I have taken these two pieces and flipped them all the way over. So this is going to be the inside of the building. And I'm going to just paint it all white. So kind of easy. You know, this is a very complicated model, but I've kind of designed it in a way that the individual steps of this are actually pretty easy in and of themselves. Just keep that in mind whenever you're coming up with your own design for a scratch-built model. When you come up with something interesting, ask yourself the question always, am I going to be able to do that? Is that going to be possible? Like, can I make that cut? Can I do that curve? Can I do, don't come up with something that's really amazing that looks great in Sketch or in Google SketchUp where I designed this, and then find out that you're not going to be able to build it. At least try to look at it and say, individually, can I do these different steps? And as long as you can, you're going to be fine. So I'm going to finish up doing this. I think this is enough for a video. It's probably getting way too long at this point. I can't imagine how much footage I have to go through to edit. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope it didn't completely bore you to death. And coming next, I'm going to be showing you some scenes of what's going to happen in the final video, where I put this whole thing together and it looks really amazing. But I don't know yet, because I can't see the future and this is all I've got. So I hope to see you then. Throw a comment on there, or a like, thumbs up, whatever it's called, and subscribe. That would be wonderful if you did that, so that you could actually be notified when that video comes out to see the rest of this. And I'll see you then. Take care. Bye.